The alarm did not wait for me to open my eyes. It tore through the sleeping quarters like a blade through paper, and I was on my feet before my mind caught up with my body. Red light spilled across the metal walls of the station. Somewhere above me, a voice repeated the same words over and over. Unknown fleet approaching. Unknown fleet approaching. My name is Oliver Hart, and 6 months ago I was just a communications officer on a quiet research post at the edge of human space. That night, everything changed. I ran down the corridor with my boots slipping on the cold floor. Doors slid open ahead of me, one after another, as the station recognized my clearance and let me through. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. When I reached the control deck, the room was already full of people shouting over each other, trying to make sense of the numbers scrolling across every screen. Grace Ellison, the station commander, stood at the center of it all. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp and quick, moving from one display to another. "Talk to me," she said, without turning around. A young technician named Daniel Voss answered her, his voice shaking. 81 ships. They came out of nowhere. No warning beacon, no signal, nothing. They are already past our outer sensors. Time until they reach us? 11 minutes. The room went silent for a moment. 11 minutes was nothing. 11 minutes was barely enough time to breathe, let alone prepare for a fleet of that size. I stepped closer to the main screen. The shapes on it were strange, angular, nothing like anything I had studied in training. They moved with a kind of arrogance, spread out in a wide formation, as if they already knew they had won. "Do we know who they are?" I asked. Grace turned to me. "No. But 4 days ago, a listening post near the edge of the system caught something in deep space. A structure, a build-up. We sent one warning, only one. I remembered that warning. I had helped translate it into every known frequency, every band we could think of, just in case something out there was listening. 4 words, nothing more. Do not come closer." We had no way of knowing if anyone had received it. We had hoped, quietly, that it would be enough. Looking at the screen now, it was clear that it had not been enough at all. "They ignored it," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. Grace did not answer him. Instead, she pressed a button on her console and spoke into it, her voice steady despite everything. "This is Commander Ellison. All personnel, proceed to your stations. This is not a drill." The station shook slightly under my feet, a deep vibration that traveled up through the floor and into my chest. I looked at Grace. She looked back at me, and for the first time since I had known her, I saw something close to worry cross her face. "Oliver," she said, "get to the communication array. If we are going to respond, we need every channel open." I nodded and ran. The corridor to the communication array felt longer than it had ever felt before. Every step echoed against the metal walls. I passed a woman named Alice Ferris, one of the station's engineers, sprinting in the opposite direction with a tool case in her hand. She barely glanced at me before disappearing around a corner. When I reached the array room, the equipment was already humming, lights blinking in patterns I recognized from years of training. I sat down at the main console and began scanning frequencies, searching for anything, any signal that might tell us more about what was coming toward us. Nothing, just silence, and the growing shadow of 81 ships on the sensor feed. A voice crackled through my earpiece. It was Grace again. "Oliver, listen carefully. Central Command has authorized a full response. We are activating the deep field system." My hands froze over the console. The deep field system was something we had built years ago, quietly, without much attention from the wider public. It was not a weapon in the way people usually imagined weapons. It did not fire anything. It did not explode. It simply reached into the space around a target and unraveled the delicate balance that kept a ship's engine stable. It had only been tested once before, in a controlled environment, far from any living thing. "Are we sure about this?" I asked. "We are sure," Grace said. "They had their warning. We gave them every chance to turn back." I swallowed hard and turned back to my console. My job now was simple. Keep every channel open, in case anyone out there decided, even at the last second, to listen. The minutes passed like hours. I watched the fleet grow larger on the screen, closer and closer, until I could make out the individual shapes of the ships, each one large enough to carry thousands. My throat tightened. Somewhere on those ships were people, or things, that had no idea what was about to happen to them. 3 minutes. Daniel's voice came over the comm system, tight with tension. I thought about the warning we had sent. 4 words, so simple, so short, and yet it carried everything we needed it to carry. We had not begged, we had not threatened, we had simply told the truth, and hoped that would be enough. It had not been. 2 minutes, Daniel said. Grace's voice came through again, calm and clear. All stations, hold position, do not fire unless ordered. I sat there, watching the numbers fall, feeling the weight of every second pressing down on me. The station around me was quiet now, the kind of quiet that comes when everyone is holding their breath at the same time. 1 minute. I closed my eyes for just a second, and in that second, I thought about my sister back on Earth, about the quiet mornings I used to spend walking along the coast before I left for this post. I thought about how strange it was that all of that history, all of that peace, could come down to this single moment. They are entering the threshold line, Daniel said. And then, everything changed. The deep field system activated without a sound. There was no flash of light, no burst of energy visible to the eye. On the screen, I watched as 9 of the lead ships simply stopped being ships. Their outlines flickered, then dissolved into a soft, expanding cloud of dust, drifting silently in the black of space. No one on the station cheered. No one shouted. The room stayed silent, every person staring at the screen with wide eyes, as if we could not quite believe what we were seeing, even though we were the ones who had caused it. "Report," Grace said quietly. 9 ships gone, Daniel answered. "The rest of the fleet is turning, they are retreating." I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. On the screen, the remaining ships scattered, breaking formation entirely, moving away from the threshold line as fast as their engines could carry them. It was not a victory that felt like the victories I had read about in old stories. There was no celebration in the room, just relief, quiet and heavy, settling over everyone like a blanket. "Do we pursue?" Daniel asked. "No," Grace said firmly. "We do not need to. They understand now." I sat back in my chair, my hands still trembling slightly from the tension of the last few minutes. Around me, the station slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though the air still felt thick with everything that had just happened. Grace walked into the communication array a few minutes later, her expression unreadable. She looked at the screen, at the empty space where 9 ships had been just moments ago, and then she looked at me. "You did well tonight," she said. "I did not do anything," I answered. "I just watched. Watching carefully. When everyone else is panicking, is not nothing," she said. "It is exactly what we needed." I did not know what to say to that, so I simply nodded. Over the following days, the station received reports from other outposts along the border. The retreating fleet had not stopped to regroup. It had not attempted a second approach. It had simply vanished back into deep space, moving away from human territory as quickly as it had arrived. 4 days after the retreat, we received something unexpected. A single data packet, arriving on a frequency we had never used before, translated cleanly into our own language by systems we did not fully understand. It contained a short message, calm and without any anger in its words. "We received your warning. We did not believe it. We understand now." That was all. No threats, no demands, no promises of revenge. Just an acknowledgement, quiet and final, that something had been learned. Grace called a meeting a week later, gathering the senior staff of the station in the main briefing room. I sat near the back, still trying to process everything that had happened. Alice Ferris sat beside me, her arms crossed, her eyes tired but focused. "We need to talk about what this means going forward," Grace said, standing at the front of the room. "We are not the only ones who know about the deep field system now. Word will spread, quietly, through channels we cannot control. Other powers out there will start asking questions." "What do we tell them?" Alice asked. "The truth," Grace said. "We do not go looking for conflict, we never have. But if anyone chooses to ignore a warning meant to protect them, they should understand the consequences will be real." A woman near the front, an analyst named Emma Whitfield, raised her hand. "Do we know anything more about who they were? Where they came from?" Grace shook her head. "Not yet. Our scientists are studying the wreckage that drifted after the engagement. It is unlike anything we have seen before. Whoever built those ships was advanced, but they were also, it seems, overconfident. They assumed we were weaker than we are." I thought about that for a long moment. It was strange to think that somewhere out there, an entire civilization had looked at us, at our small warning, and dismissed it without a second thought. It was even stranger to think that the very restraint we had shown, offering a single warning instead of an immediate response, had been mistaken for weakness. "They thought we would not act," I said quietly. Everyone in the room turned to look at me. "They thought a warning meant we were afraid," I continued. "They thought since we did not send ships, since we did not threaten them directly, that we had nothing to back up our words." Grace nodded slowly. "And that misunderstanding cost them 9 ships, and, more importantly, it cost them any future advantage of surprise. They know now that we do not make idle statements." The meeting continued for a while longer, covering practical matters, repairs to the station, adjustments to sensor arrays, updates to communication protocols. But my mind kept drifting back to that message we had received. We understand now. 3 simple words that carried so much weight. That night, after the meeting ended, I found myself back at the communication array, alone, scanning the quiet frequencies out of habit more than necessity. Alice found me there an hour later, carrying 2 cups of something warm. "You should be resting," she said, handing me one of the cups. "I know," I said. "I just cannot stop thinking about it." She sat down beside me, looking at the empty screens in front of us. "About the ships?" "About how close it was," I said. "If they had ignored the warning and kept moving even a little faster, or if the deep field system had failed, or if any one of 100 small things had gone differently, none of us would be sitting here right now." Alice was quiet for a moment, but none of those things happened. We were ready. Grace was ready. You were ready. "I do not feel ready," I admitted. "I feel like I got lucky." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe being ready and being lucky are not so different from each other. You cannot control every variable. All you can do is prepare as well as you can, and trust that preparation when the moment comes." I turned to look at her. "Do you think they will come back? The ones who attacked us?" Alice considered the question carefully before answering. "I think whoever they are, they now understand that we are not an easy target. Whether that stops them completely, I do not know, but it will make them think twice before trying something like this again." We sat there together for a while, watching the quiet static on the screens, listening to the low hum of the station around us. For the first time since the alarm had woken me from sleep, I felt a small sense of calm settle over me. Weeks passed, and the station slowly returned to something resembling normal life. Repairs were completed. New protocols were put in place. Grace worked closely with Central Command to establish clearer guidelines for how future warnings would be issued, making sure that any message we sent would be backed by a visible readiness to respond if it was ignored. Daniel Voss, who had been shaking with fear during those first tense minutes, grew steadier with each passing week, taking on more responsibility during drills and exercises. Emma Whitfield led a team studying the wreckage from the retreating fleet, uncovering small pieces of information about the technology and, slowly, about the culture that had built it. I found myself thinking less about the fear of that night and more about what it had taught all of us. We had not wanted a conflict. We had sent a warning because we hoped to avoid exactly what happened, but when that warning was ignored, we had been ready to respond, and that readiness had made all the difference. One evening, several months after the incident, Grace called me into her office. The room was small and simply furnished, with a single window looking out over the dark curve of the planet below. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said, "for that night, for staying calm when it mattered most." "I was terrified," I said honestly. "So was I," she admitted, surprising me. "Fear is not the opposite of courage, Oliver. Acting well despite fear is what courage actually looks like." I thought about her words long after I left her office. They stayed with me through the following weeks, through every drill, every quiet night shift, every moment when my mind wandered back to that first alarm tearing through my sleep. We never received another message from the fleet that had approached us that night. No further warnings needed to be sent. It seemed, at least for now, that the lesson had been learned. Our small, simple warning, 4 short words spoken with quiet confidence, had been enough to change the course of history, even if it had taken a difficult night to prove it. Standing at the observation window later that year, looking out at the same stars that had once carried an approaching fleet toward us, I understood something clearly for the first time. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, patient, and calm, waiting until the moment it is truly needed. And on that night, when everything could have gone wrong, it had been enough.